Hello, you're listening to Wine Blast. I'm Susie, he's Peter. Welcome to our wine-fueled world. For this episode, we have our heads very much in Rías Baixas, in what is the second and concluding part of our focus on this intriguing wine region in northwest Spain. In our last episode, you called it the land of mists and mellow fruitfulness.
Yeah, well, I'm nothing if not highly original. And I certainly never rip off well-known, famous poets like John Keats. I wouldn't dream of it. No, absolutely not. It's all my own work. But no, I mean, I like that line here because I think it really does capture, you know, what is quite a damp, sort of fertile landscape, heavily influenced by the Atlantic Ocean, you know, where vines run riot and the wines are just packed full of absolutely that, of freshness and fruit. And
so maybe it is a land of poets and parties too. Anyway, either way,
both, yeah.
We just wanted to say you don't need to listen to that first part to enjoy this one. These programmes stand alone quite happily. Yeah. And by way of brief recap, in the first part we set the scene, exploring the place, the people, its history and food. We talked about the Celtic heritage, the popular pilgrimage to the stunning cathedral at Santiago de Compostela, the proud seafaring traditions, the importance of shellfish and seafood in the local diet, the prominence of women in society at large, and winemaking circles in particular. Am I missing anything? Is that it? I think that was about it, wasn't it?
That's pretty good. I mean, obviously wine. We did actually touch on wine.
Did I not mention wine?
You didn't mention wine. It doesn't matter. There's so many other things.
I think it's pretty obvious.
I mean, I think we love a good tangent, but even we would struggle to get through an entire podcast without talking about the wine. No.
Fair enough.
We talked about the vineyards and the wine as sort of part of the fabric of society, as you've touched on. You know, the fact that wine is intimately connected to all the things you've mentioned: the people, the place, the history, the food. We could call it the Rías Baixas lifestyle, if you like. But in particular, you know, we looked at the revival of red wine and the rise of sparkling wine in Rías Baixas, which are two sort of intriguing trends going on at the moment.
Absolutely. But now we've set the scene and we've looked at the trends. We want to cut to the chase and zero in on this region's absolute USP, which is its unique brand of steely, refreshing, often complex, elegantly saline, generally food-friendly white wine. In particular, the Albariño grape variety, which dominates plantings here. It accounts for a whopping 95% of production. And ultimately, we want to ask the question, what makes Rías Baixas Albariño special?
Yeah, here's a taster of what's coming up.
Albariño is, for me, is the king of the grapes, one of the best grapes in the world.
With only one variety, it's incredible how many different wines you are allowed to do. I think it's a beautiful variety.
All that complexity that we have in the land is in the bottle too.
Isabel Salgado of Fillaboa, Vicky Moreque from Pathos Señorans, and Luisa Freire of Santiago Ruiz there, with some bold words.
Yeah.
We'll be hearing more from them and other key figures in the Rías Baixas wine scene in the course of this programme. And we'll also be recommending some pretty special wines as we go along.
Yeah, that's what keeps us going. And we should say thanks to the Dio Rías Baixas for sponsoring these programmes and keeping us in the wine. Right, I know we set the scene in the first episode, but I did just want to recap quickly on a couple of key points by way of preface to this one. So Rías Baixas is a wine region spread across 5 subzones dotted around coastal Galicia, just to the north of the Portuguese border, which is formed by the Minho River.
Although red and sparkling do crop up, this is quintessential white wine territory. There's evidence that the Albariño grape was here before the Romans, and this is cool climate viticulture, certainly by Spanish standards, with invigorating freshness very much part of the wine's DNA.
But Galicia, for much of its history, was a pretty remote region and a land of the minifundio, which are small holding properties. So just sort of, you see them there, they're bursting with life, and from chickens to goats and vegetables, fruit, and of course vines. Now, contented self-sufficiency was for long the status quo, the very antithesis of mass market commerciality. So it's no surprise that, you know, when the modern wine era started in the 1980s, there was very little awareness of this region, or indeed of Albariño, on the global wine market.
How times change. To recap on what's happened since, in 1986, Spain joined the EU, allowing development funds to promote business and exports. In 1988, the DO Rías Baixas was created. There had been an appellation before, actually called Albariño, but they needed to change that, so chose Rías Baixas. Very quickly, the world woke up to the glory of Rías Baixas wines, smitten by its unique Albariño-based whites. The result was the appellation vineyard shot up from 237 hectares in 1987 to 4,480 today.
I mean, that's just a massive growth.
It's quite a jump, isn't it?
But some things stay the same. So, this is still a land of minifundios and small growers. There are 5,021 growers in the region and 22,362 parcels of land. Lots of numbers there, but essentially you're talking,
a lot.
That works out the average parcel of vines being 0.2 hectares. Which is pretty much a large garden, as we're talking about a minifundio, a large garden. And the average grower has just under a hectare of vines in total, so 0.9 hectares. So we're talking small-scale viticulture here.
I think it's Burgundy with a Glythian accent, isn't it?
It's nice,
yeah. But just to follow up on those figures, the region has 178 wineries. Often growers sell to bigger producers or cooperative wineries. And total DO production is about 37 million bottles, which is pretty small. Rioja, for example, is 340 million bottles. But if you look at the trends, it's all the same. Export figures, for example, show pretty much nothing in the early 1990s, 70,000 litres, shooting up to 9.5 million litres by 2021.
Yeah. So, in short, Rías Baixas has been on a sort of wild ride of wine success over the last 30 years.
It's on the up.
Yeah. And I mean, there have been growing pains, which we'll come on to. But this is one thing to keep in mind about the bigger picture here. The rapid metamorphosis of Albariño and Rías Baixas going from being largely unknown to this sort of global success story. The question is, how, why, and what does the future hold from here?
Yeah, so we are going to look at Albariño, as well as the other local grape varieties here. We're going to talk terroir, subregions, blends, innovation and experimentation, oak, lees, bottle age, climate change, criticisms, competition, all sorts of things to get to the heart of it all. But to kick us off, you went on a wander, didn't you?
I did. As I'm wont to do, both metaphorically and in person. You never quite know. And it's not always entirely helpful. I'm very happy to admit that. But no, we want to zoom in on Albariño and the wine. So I thought it'd be helpful to get us in the zone, as it were. The mindset, the Rías Baixas zone. So I recorded a little bit while I was walking through a vineyard right next to the Minho River, actually, at the beautiful Pazo San Mauro in Condado do Teia. And here it is. So I'm walking through a beautiful vineyard in Rías Baixas. The atmosphere is very heavy and damp. It's been raining yesterday. The sun is trying to peep through the clouds, but not doing a great job. It's green everywhere, and the most sort of arresting thing, the most noticeable thing is the smell. And I wish we could recreate smell through audio. Because if we could, you would smell the most amazing kind of heady cocktail of aromas of wet, damp earth and trees, eucalypt freshness and wild herbs and laurel. All these things, they're so wet and damp. You can just smell them everywhere. And down by the river Minho, which separates Portugal from Spain, flowing fast. I'm just going past a little waterfall here. It is absolutely stunning. This is a really evocative world. It's a world full of aromas and flavours and character and drama, and just the most beautiful landscape. It's not your hot, arid, sunlit vineyards you might normally expect. It's a different world. It's a world of freshness and aromatics and good food as well. So it all works really well, really nicely together. You can see the food growing around us at the same time. It's a land of plenty. It's a land of abundance. It's a land where things grow and they have character. And it's really quite captivating.
Very lyrical. And didn't someone else you talked to have a nice way of summing up Albariño, sort of tying it in to the local landscape too?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was Stephanie Schilling from Santiago Ruiz. And I really like this because it's a lovely way into Albariño and sort of summing up these Rías Baixas whites and what makes them special.
When I try about Albariño, I always think about summer, ocean, green, yellow, the smell of the wet grass, the smell of the eucalyptus trees in Galicia, the smell of the orchids, and the sensation, because it's not like you smell it or so, but you feel it and you know it's there, of the wet stones.
That is lovely. You really get a sense of the wines and the place.
Yeah, it's really nice, isn't it? I mean, she did a much better job than me, obviously, of summing it up, and much more concise. You know, that won't surprise you, of all people, that I tend to bang on about things. Other people do it much better than you usually.
Good at the chat.
Anyway, so, no, Albariño. This grape that is 95% of Rías Baixas production. What is it and why is it special here?
Good question, yeah. So it's a popular grape. Pretty aromatic, although not as piercing or extrovert, say, as some Sauvignon Blanc or Riesling or Gewürztraminer. It usually has fresh acidity and fresh flavours as a baseline. You know, think apple and peach and orange blossom, some fresh garden herbs, honeysuckle, that kind of thing. But it can respond well to aging, both on the lees, the dead yeast cells after fermentation, and in the bottle when it becomes richer and more golden while retaining that underlying freshness. It can be oaked, but usually it isn't, and we'll come back to this. And Rías Baixas Albariño often comes with an underlying tension and minerality and a subtle saline, even bittersweet hint on the finish that is quite distinctive.
Yeah, and there's often a sort of intensity and complexity to Rías Baixas Albariño that you struggle to find elsewhere, isn't there? A sort of, sort of rugged, piercing quality that really gets the senses firing. So it's, rather than you've been tangoed, it's almost like you've been Albariñoed, that sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? It kind of gets you going.
I do. Anyway, so Albariño, it does seem to have a long history in this part of the world, which may be why. And that may be partly because of the fact it has naturally thick skins, so it can resist grape rot like botrytis, which is a risk here, given rain and humidity can be issues in this kind of coastal territory with lots of rivers and bodies of water. It also ripens well, giving good sugar levels. Hence, there's often a fair whack of alcohol in the wines.
One final point about Albariño is that it's a pretty vigorous vine, which is why the traditional system of training it in Rías Baixas is on pergolas, so up high. This also means the grapes are sort of well ventilated, again, important to controlling rot. There are more modern versions or alternatives nowadays in the region, but lots of people still retain this training method. For example, Isabel Salgado at Fillaboa said she'd done trials comparing training systems like, VSP, which is the modern one you see in all the modern wineries, versus the pergola. And the results were really similar, actually, in the grapes and the wines. So, she's sticking with the pergola because, she says it's the best system in our area and it's traditional. So, it balances the plant's vigour, it maximises photosynthesis, and it gives, the best wine.
Anyway, well done for bringing in Isabel, because it's who we're going to hear from next.
There we go.
Isabel is an experienced and brilliant winemaker who's been making wine in the region for almost 30 years. She says she remembers the early years when the producers were learning about Albariño, and it was a new thing in the markets like the UK and Europe, and that it was hard work. But then she says, over time, and I quote, we got famous because they travelled and showed the wines and people just loved them.
Yeah, so I asked her to sum up Rías Baixas.
Rías Baixas is a magic place. I've been working here for almost 30 years, and I think it's a region that has something special, different for other regions. The influence, the Atlantic influence, all the winds from the sea, and also the soils are very special because are granite soils, very acid, and the wines that we have here have high acidity, and I think they are very different from other wines in Spain. I think that Rías Baixas is very unique if you compare with other regions in Europe or in other parts of the world. I think it's special. Yes, special place.
Yes. So let's turn to Albariño now. You've worked with Albariño.
Yeah.
It's been your life's work, if I could put it like that. What's so special about Albariño?
Albariño is for me is the king of the grapes, one of the best grapes in the world. I think I tasted a lot of varieties around the world and wines from several parts of the world, but Albariño has a structure and flavors and aromas and has quality and characteristics that allows the wines to evolve and to age very well. So you can make very young wines, but then you can make long-lasting wines and very interesting and great wines. I mean, excellent wines.
So you make wines in both of those styles, young wines and slightly older wines.
Yeah.
Describe to us what a great young Albariño should taste like, and then what a great mature Albariño should taste like.
A young Albariño, you can feel all this fruity aroma, like pineapple, citrus, pear, flower, a lot of aroma, which are primary aroma that came from the grapes. And then when it evolves, you can find another aromas disappear, or another aroma appear. And you can feel, for example, more yeast aroma or bakery, dry fruit, for example. And then you can feel in the mouthfeel, you can have the softness and a very well integrated acidity that you don't have in the young wines. No? That you can feel the acidity is more present. And then when you have a wine that has 2 years old or more, you can see that this acidity is more integrated.
You've described beautifully a mature Albariño there. Do you think we should be aging our Albariños a bit more than we do? Should we be putting them in the cellar and letting them age in the bottle?
Yes, because I think it's a good thing. Now we realize that this is one of the best qualities that Albariño has. But when I started working, nobody made an Albariño like this. Always, the people ask for a young Albariño. Always.
What makes, obviously, Albariño is grown in different parts of the world now. What makes Albariño from Rías Baixas special?
I think the soil, the situation, the location, and the Atlantic influence, and the weather. Everything. Everything. And also the training system. Because if you plant Albariño in another soil, in another influence, you will get another thing.
And what about in the glass?
I think that that acidity that has Rías Baixas wine is different for other places. And the acidity is something that, and the aroma also.
Yeah. To what extent can Albariño reflect its terroir, and how much more do you think we have to understand about that?
One of the characteristics, I think, very most important in the Albariño is the minerality, and then you can find when Albariño you age an Albariño.
So it comes also out with age.
With the aging, yes, you can feel more the soil.
Is that anything to do with the contact with the lees in the tank when it ages? Does that sort of bring out the sense of minerality?
Yes, of course.
In your
yes. This is really important. The contact with the lees. The lees protect from the oxygen and also give a lot of aroma and polysaccharides and monoproteins that give softness and mouthfeel but also a lot of aroma, different aroma from a young Albariño.
And we've just tried some of your delicious wines, including the La Fillaboa 1898, which was aged on the lees for 6 years.
Yes, it's 2016 vintage, and now we are in 2024, so it's 8 years. And you see that The wine is very young, but the evolution of the wine is totally different from a young Albariño.
So would you say that aging on the lees and bottle age are the two keys to unlocking the potential of Albariño?
Yes, you're right. Totally right.
So we did touch on this in the last programme, but here we have it from one of the leading Rías Baixas winemakers, probably one of the leading Albariño makers in the world. Albariño is world class. Whether it's the king is up for debate, but it's in the mix. And as Isabel says, it not only makes great, fresh, young whites, but it also comes into its own when aged on the lees and then aged in bottles, showing more kind of terroir and complexity.
Yeah, totally. So I mentioned the Fillaboa 1898 there. This is an absolutely stunning wine. You know, the current 2016 vintage is only the second such wine they've made. The first one was in 2010. It's all fruit from their beautiful, windswept, seriously steep Monte Alto vineyard, which overlooks the Minho and Teia rivers. Very special, beautiful spot. It spends 6 years on the lees in stainless steel tanks with regular stirring or batonnage, and it's epic. I mean, it's glorious. It's just packed full of bready, yeasty, patisserie sort of flavours. Then you've got roasted lemons and peach. It's just rich and honeyed and succulent and layered and foody.
I get the feeling you like it.
Yeah, it
does sound pretty special.
It is. You know, but one thing I noticed was that this wine, it's really inviting and fun and enjoyable. You know, I think if I'm going to criticise, some Rías Baixas whites can be a little austere sometimes, you know, particularly when they're young. And not necessarily the most user-friendly. You know, you've got to understand the context of it. But Isabel's wines, I noticed, were really approachable and engaging, you know, from her basic Fillaboa 2023, which is just full of pear and peach fruits, really juicy and appealing. It's almost like a kind of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc take on Rías Baixas Albariño, you know, in a good way. And also then her Finca Monte Alto Albariño 2021 is sort of like a stepping stone between these two wines. That one spends 2 years on the lees and has a wonderful rich texture with ripe apples and hints of honey and brioche. It's really, really good.
So we're going to come back to things like terroir, aren't we, and the importance of aging Rías Baixas Albariño, among other things. But for now, let's just take a quick break. To summarise so far, Rías Baixas has gone from 0 to 60 in just a few decades, finding global success with its unique whites based on the characterful Albariño grape. This is a region of small growers, but big, majestic, serious whites that express terroir and age really well. But we're not just talking one monolithic style. Diversity beyond the aging is in the mix too, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we want to get into now. I think sometimes there's a perception that Rías Baixas is all about Albariño, and Albariño is always fresh and crisp and fruity, and that's it. But that's not it.
No.
You know, that's the kind of, supermarket reality, if you want to put it that way. It's one side of things, but it doesn't tell the whole story.
Okay, so one of the reasons Rías Baixas wines are more diverse than they may at first seem is that this isn't just one big homogeneous region. As we said at the top, this is a region of 5 subzones dotted around in different areas, and they can all make slightly different styles.
Yes, there are a couple of tiny subzones, Sotomayor near Pontevedra and Ribeira do Uja near Santiago de Compostela. But then the 3 main subzones are Val do Salnés in very coastal territory around the town of Cambados, which is by far the biggest sub-region, this one. It's got 50% of the vineyard and 70% of the growers, Salnés. And then the 2 subzones in the south of the region, along the Minho River and the border with Portugal, are O Rosal in more coastal territory, and then Condado de Teia more inland.
And the very different terroirs can give different characteristics to the wines. So by way of very broad brushstrokes, Salnés wines tend to be fresher, higher acid, more tense, very pure, and often with a salty, briny hint on the finish. They're often 100% Albariño. Orosal can be quite aromatic and peachy, and then Condado do Tea, more inland, the warmest and driest area, tends to make richer, fuller-bodied, fleshier styles, often quite complex and powerful. Albariño is usually blended in Orosal and Condado do Tea with things like Trechadura and Loureira, which can also obviously influence the style.
Yeah. So while I was hurtling around these various areas in our car, often in the teeming rain,
it is such a region of rain, isn't it? I so remember.
Yeah.
that.
Or maybe it's just when we go there. We
I
do take the weather with us.
I think it's raining.
While I was doing that, I got some producers' views on what makes their subzones different. First up, I asked Vicky Marecki from Pathos Señorans if Salnés, her region, had a particular characteristic.
Yeah. For me, for example, this bitterness at the end when they are young is very typical from Salnés Valley. We are still probably 90% or 98% in the Salnés Valley is still imperial assistant. That also changed a little the ripeness. And the climate is a bit different. All the sub-regions have different climate. And also the way of producing. Here, normally we produce 100% Albariño. In the rest of the valleys, as you know, they mixed up with the other typical varieties that here doesn't ripen correctly. The acidity is higher here. So they are a bit different, yes. The dry extract, I really don't have knowledge enough about the other regions, but here is quite high. So our structure can be intense and powerful.
Then I asked Luisa Freire from Santiago Ruiz about Orosal.
The Rosal is a mature climate. We can take orange, we can take kiwi, we can take flowers, we can take vegetables. In the Rosal, is all the world is in this little space. No, we have the river, but we are very near the sea. We have hills, we have stone, but we have pebbles. It's a blend. And when you take the different grapes, you take the Loureiro, take the Albariño, the Caño Blanco, the Trechadura, the Godello. All that complexity that we have in the land is in the bottle too. And then for me, Rosal is that is complexity, but a good complexity. You can taste and you can smell and you can put in the mouth. You have body in a bottle.
Finally, I asked Natalia Rodriguez of Señorío de Rubios about Condado do Tea.
In the area of Condado do Tea, the climate is less aggressive than the part of the coast. We are near to River Minho, protected by the slope of the mountains, and the Albariño is very fruity with less acidity if you compare, for example, with Salnés of other area. Good balance between the acidity and alcohol. Fresh, I think, is one of the most important difference if you compare with other Albariño in Rías Baixas.
So we've got the climatic differences between the subzones, but we've also got the different grapes going on.
Yeah.
So more pure Albariño in Salnés, and then more blending in Orosal and Condado do Tea. And that's obviously going to have an effect on the wine styles.
Of course. And what's interesting is that, because Albariño has become so popular and a star name, there's a danger that the blends, made with these other traditional local varieties would be sidelined. But it's really good to see, some producers remaining fiercely loyal to the blends, which are a historic style, just as it is over the river, the other side of the Minho River in Vinho Verde territory in northern Portugal.
And didn't you do a tasting that focused on these other varieties?
Yes, so
right?
at Adegas Galegas with winemaker Lucia Barbosa, we tried a bunch of these other white varieties, and it was really interesting. So Trechadura has big berries. It can be quite neutral, and it's often used actually to bring down Albariño's naturally high alcohol and sort of soften the blend. Loureira often smells of laurel. That's what the name means, especially if it's picked early. So it can add sort of leafy complexity to a blend. If it's harvested later, though, it can give more full-bodied. It's a little bit versatile in that sense. I liked this one when I tried it. I think it was a more earlier harvested version. It was fresh and appley and floral with really tangy acidity and good structure. And then Caño Blanco, for example, ripens late with small berries and lots of seeds. So it can give sort of tannins and complexity and sort of pithiness to a blend.
And presumably the good blends make for naturally more complex wines.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's just a different style, isn't it? Lucia described it as like using salt and pepper, the tools to give a wine complexity without resorting to winemaking tricks. I asked her why she uses blends.
I think diversity is always good. Here we respect the past using the grapes that are here from the past. We are in the border to Portugal, in the cross of the Minho River, and the white grapes that we have here from several centuries. We have studies and we have translations that they are here. We have the Trechadura, the Loureira, the Cainho Blanco, and the Albariño. And if we can preserve these old vineyards, we have a future. We can respect what the old people have here and improve several things, and gave a product distinct. Albariño is everywhere, no? All world have Albariño. But here, in a traditional way, people blend the grapes to do his wines home. So in a year that can be very dry, Albariño can suffer with low acidity. Maybe Cainho can help me with that and gave me a little bit tonicity that can help to put it, the blend in balance. So these different grapes are a respect from the past, but use it as a tool to improve the winemaking of our days.
Yeah. And what is your take on Albariño? As you know, it is, as you said, it is, a very famous grape from this region. Yes. It's the majority of production from this region. How do you see the grape and its style?
It's a fantastic grape because we can do different products with the same grape, but we need to know if we choose Albariño from near the river or if we choose Albariño from the top of the mountain. Of course, we will have different profiles, no? I can have a fruity character of an Albariño that came from a rich soil with a lot of fertility and vigorous vineyards. And of course, it's easy to drink. It's an Albariño with a lot of tropical fruits, apples, citrus. Nice. But I can also have a different and much also a pleasure wines if I can have a vineyard on the mountain that is not so rich. The grapes don't have so much precursors of aroma, but I can show a minerality and a mineral profile. So the consumer can have different pleasures, different moments of drink the wine. If I can be in the pool with my friends or in the garden drinking a glass of wine, I can choose one that comes from the valley. And if I want to do a dinner in a Michelin-starred restaurant, I can show something that came from different way. Also, we can have sparklings, nice sparklings. Also, we can have beautiful wines that can stay on a barrel and have another personality and keep it for many years on my cellar and show it for aging for many years. We can have different pleasures in different moments of consumption of the wines with the same grape. It's a beautiful grape. Not much grapes can give this. Of course, we know Riesling or another ones, of course, but Albarin is from here, or we believe that the natural place of the Albariño is the northwest part of the Peninsula Iberica, so the north of Portugal and north of Spain, Galicia, in Rías Baixas, and in the north of Portugal. So we have some characteristics here that can we can show the same grape in different profiles to the world, I think. And it's from here, so...
A grape that can take you from the pool to a Michelin-starred restaurant. I do love that notion. But again, fascinating reasons behind the diversity we see in these Rías Baixas whites.
Yeah, and you can see this increasing diversity in the wines, wines at Gallagher's too. We talked about the excellent Branco de Brancos, didn't we, in the last episode? But they're putting more and more focus on the vineyard, which is intriguing. I got a sneak preview of their Pazo de Almuña Entre Muros wines. The 2022 vintage is looking beautiful. It's so complex and resonant and harmonious. It's very generous but well structured with lovely integration. It just bodes really well. That's a single vineyard wine.
And aren't they going to do a higher altitude Albariño as well, given the threat of climate change?
Absolutely. We talked about this, didn't we? In response to the climate warming. Now we probably don't have time to get properly into climate change here, but all the winemakers admit it's an issue. They're having to confront right now. For example, Susana Pérez at Paso San Mauro in Condado de Tella, who we heard from in the last program. That's the warmest subzone, and she's having to adjust her pruning and training to reduce sun damage or sun exposure to the bunches and enable her to harvest ever earlier, to retain acidity and not get such high alcohol levels. Fernando at Mariscos Laureano, the shellfish business, we heard from the last program again, he said that the past couple of years, production has plummeted because the seawater has just been too warm for the shellfish. So, this is a serious issue.
And Natalia at Señorío de Rubios said in our last episode that although it's meaning reds are riper, it's not good news in terms of the bigger picture. And it may be shifting the dial slightly in terms of styles in Rías Baixas.
Yeah, absolutely. Not always in a negative way, but it's definitely changing things subtly, isn't it? Yeah.
Anyway, to move on, Lucia also mentioned Albariño being planted in other parts of the world. And it's true that its popularity with producers outside Galicia has grown in recent years, hasn't it?
Absolutely. And it's no surprise, really, given how tasty the grape is.
It is, yeah.
And how it's become so popular with wine drinkers, So, we're seeing it cropping up now, aren't we? From, I don't know, California and Oregon. Oregon, Washington, around there. Australia, it's down there. It's in New Zealand. Uruguay is going big on it with pretty good results, has to be said, It's even cropping up in that fortress of local tradition of France, isn't it? We have one from the Languedoc.
Dare it. Yes, no, we did. We did, absolutely.
Southern French Feast episode, didn't we? We've even tried a couple of English Albariños.
We have. So it's getting everywhere.
It's getting everywhere. And you sense this growth is just going to continue over time.
Yeah. So I guess what's important for Rías Baixas then is to assert its identity as an historic homeland for Albariño, which makes a unique, distinctive style that can't be copied, which is like the global standard, if you like, and is just as much about Rías Baixas as it is about the grape variety.
Absolutely. And as Isabel said, terroir is important here. Producers need to be selling and marketing distinctive, high-quality wines. And this is where we come on to a key point for me, the subject of aging these wines. We've touched on the importance of age. Isabel agreed that these wines become more complex and expressive as they mature. And we also mentioned this in our last episode. Albariño is a grape that quite simply comes into its own with age. Mature it on the lees, leave it in the tank or bottle, and it just blossoms. And
this is really easy to prove just by tasting these wines, isn't it? The difference that some aging makes to Rías Baixas Albariño is really clear. It transforms a fresh, intense, fruit-driven, sometimes slightly austere, as we're saying, white, into a complex, rounded, succulent, engaging style that is so much more than the sum of its parts.
Totally, So I have to say, I came away from Rías Baixas thinking, good value, fruity, fresh Albariño can be made, all around the world now. Rías Baixas is a small region specialising in sort of distinctive, intense styles of Albariño, and it wants to portray itself as the heartland of this brilliant grape that gains so much from age. So here's the idea. Here's my pitch.
Go on.
Why not instigate a minimum aging period for Rías Baixas Albariño and transform the offering in one fell swoop? How about that?
That sounds controversial. I think it would be hard to sell the idea to producers, wouldn't it?
Probably.
It would hit cash flow pretty hard.
Yeah.
And it would obviously raised prices too, which wouldn't be popular either.
I understand that. There is obviously precedent for this in the wine world. Brunello, Montalcino, various other, some Rioja categories. But, it's just an idea. I don't know. It's Rías Baixas Albariño it's rarely cheap.
It's
anyway,
not cheap,
isn't it?
No.
Nor,
it's not super expensive either.
In my view, nor should it be cheap.
No.
This is not... you see how the land is farmed, how the wines are made. This is artisan, craft production. This is not a grape or a region for mass market wines.
No.
So, really, if the future isn't selling big, then maybe it should be, selling smarter. Not crazy pricey, but just a premium offering. Wines with identity and with that added complexity and character that you get from age, as we're saying.
A bit of age, just a little bit.
Just a little bit of age.
Yeah.
And I think a minimum aging period would help with that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Obviously Santorini, I think you're doing the same thing with their Assyrtiko.
Yeah.
Pickpool has just come up with their Patience age category, as we discussed recently on the podcast.
Fair enough. It is an interesting idea. And I think you did, I remember, I think you told me, didn't you, you'd run this past a few producers.
I did, actually.
What response did you actually get?
Well, I asked Isabel, and as we've already heard, she agreed we should age our Albariños a bit more. I also asked Vicky at Pathos Señorans whether we should be aging our Rías Baixas Albariño more than we currently do.
I think we have moved on quite a bit on that. I think mostly all the wineries now have some aged Albariños. But I think it's still a tiny amount of old Albariños compared with the amounts that we produce of young wine, which is also delicious. I'm not saying that it's not. And it's enjoyable for a different occasion. And it allowed us to enjoy it more times because it's a little more pricely upset for all the people. But I think that we are allowed to produce beautiful, old, respectful varietal Albariño with more years. I mean that you will have the Albariño because you don't need the oak to age really with lees and varietal. So it's going to be very varietal, very respectful with the area, and it's going to show up many more things than when they are young. Like the powerful of the knowledge of the old people that they have. With the wines is the same.
Okay, so Vicky's saying quite diplomatically that the region is producing more and more Albariños with age alongside the young, fresh stuff, and that's good.
Yeah. But I also floated my controversial minimum aging idea past her, and she wasn't totally opposed, actually.
She's just being polite.
It was a discussion, but then Pathos Señorans, as we both know, do the aging stuff exquisitely well.
They've done it for a long time, haven't they?
It's been a USP for them, hasn't it? So when I was there, I did a fabulous tasting.
Here we go.
We started with this sort of information with their straight Salnés Albariño 2023, which is just lovely, fresh pear, apple fruit with
sort of what you'd expect,
minerality, seamless palate. Then we moved on to their Selección Albariño 2020, which is the same wine. Really interesting, the same wine as their fresh young one, but kept in bottle for 3 years, right? And the difference is huge.
Really?
You get that freshness and minerality, but you get this lovely honeyed, savoury, bready richness on top of that. Kind of just proves the point, really. Anyway, moving on. Then you try their Trasua. I tried their Tras los Muros Albariño 2019, which is a very judiciously oak-aged style. Beautifully integrated.
And I think you tried some of the older stuff as well, though, didn't you?
I was coming on to that. So Señorans are famous for their Selección de Añada Albariño. It's a single vineyard wine aged for years on the lees and given extensive bottle age. So we tried the 2014 and it was stunning. Smoky, succulent, sort of magical marriage of rich, creamy succulence with revitalizing sort of ripe citrus acidity, kind of roasted curry leaf hints and a mineral sort of salty finish. And it's the lees aging that Vicky says ties the freshness together with the richness.
But I mean, so that was 10 years old. You did try an even older one too, didn't you?
We tried the 2003 Selección de Añada as well. Again, just to show that extra bit of age.
Yeah.
And 2003 was a really warm vintage.
It was. I'm sure we all remember.
And apparently, Vicky was saying the wine didn't show well at all for quite a few years. They kept trying it, thinking, "Oh no, this isn't brilliant." But now, it's breathtaking. It's unreal. It tastes like liquid gold.
Wine is so complex in that sense, isn't it?
It's just amazing.
Frustrating, but then amazing.
I know. Yeah. And so this wine, incredibly vigorous, resonant on the palate, wonderful freshness and minerality, but with this amazing glazed cream, sort of toasted brioche, old parchment and tobacco complexity. It's a wine that just stops you dead in your tracks.
So the question is, do you think it could age for longer?
Yes, good question. And I absolutely do, actually. I mean, I think it would be hard to resist the urge to drink it because it's so delicious now. And you do sense if these wines have a prime, you know, does it get much better than this?
Yeah, and if they do tip over, you're going to be super disappointed.
I think it would still go. I think really that, you know, all of the elements are there to keep going, but it's just so delicious right now. You know, one thing's clear. We are talking about wines that can benefit hugely from age. I asked Vicky how long a good Albariño can age for.
But here I tell you a little about our experience, okay? It's a big difference in between the wines that you made to age and the wines that you just, the life I think is a little shorter, okay? But anyway, in the case of the young wine, you have tried one with 3 years in bottle and it's still acidity, youngness. So we could tell that maybe 10 years more. In the case of Selección de Añada, we already produced this type of wine thinking on an aged wine. So our experience, okay, first vintage was 1996. I only had 3 experience of tasting. Last time, I think it was last year. And it was still really incredible. I don't know if it was lucky bottle, but it was still really, really nice. I more often have 2001, and it's still super enjoyable. You just have the 2003, which is already 20 years old, and it's still delicious. So we really don't know, really. If you make it to age, we can think on 20, 25, and maybe more. Let's wait a little bit.
Oh, patience is always the hardest thing when it comes to fine wine, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Anyway, I think we've covered quite a bit in terms of what makes Rías Baixas Albariño special, including age-worthiness. But just to finish off on the diversity point, there's a fair bit of experimentation going on in the region as well, isn't there?
Absolutely. And I think that's really healthy, you know. So you've got Isabel experimenting with making no added sulfur Albariño, others playing around with various things on the sparkling wine front.
Yeah, I mean, sparkling does seem like a potentially good option given Albariño works so well with aging in the bottle and then on the lees. Yeah. Plus, it's a style we all seem to be drinking more of.
Well, speak for yourself. Yeah. Anyway, no, you're right. Sparkling wine is definitely one of the few sectors in growth in global wine markets. And you know, the wines themselves do look really promising. But then you've got other things. For example, you look at a producer like Attis, which we mentioned in the last episode in the context of some truly excellent red wines made with local varieties like Caíño Tinto and Espadeiro. And they're making orange wine and sweet wine, even a sea-aged wine.
But those kind of things aren't officially allowed, are they, under the DO rules?
No, quite right, they're not yet. But the broader point I'd make is that it's really positive to see people experimenting, see people pushing the boat out. See what I've done there?
I do.
Yeah,
I do. I've got it.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
I'm impressed. I'm so impressed.
Wonderful, wonderful. I just think trying new things, you know, exploring the boundaries of possibility, I think that's really healthy. It's a sign of a dynamic wine appellation. And I think personally that the DO should evolve to kind of embrace this innovation, especially when it comes to things like sweet wines and orange wines, which really are very valid expressions of a grape like Albariño and will kind of help broaden the appellation's appeal even further.
Oh, we've got a lot of recommendations from you in this episode,
I'm on
haven't we?
recommendations.
You are.
I'm just going
This is what
there.
you should do.
I don't know, I just think these are wines that get me really excited.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the only time when you do want to make recommendations and
exactly.
really say, do this.
You can see the potential.
You can see what could happen.
If you can see the potential, it's I don't know, it's hard not to nail the colours to the master.
No, fair enough.
That's my tuppence.
Anyway, we are now, because of your tuppence, we are running out of time. But we did also want to mention another controversial topic here of oak, didn't we?
Yes, briefly. I mean, I guess it comes under the heading of experimentation and diversity too. But essentially, you know, it's clear Albariño is a grape that expresses itself beautifully when it's matured on the lees and given bottle age. It doesn't always need oak in that sense. And in fact, the results can be pretty horrible when oak is overdone or it's done badly.
I mean, fair enough, yeah. But I think what we're starting to see is a third way, isn't it? You know, where discrete oak or large format oak is used very carefully to just add to what the lees do in some respects and, you know, just round out and soften and integrate the wine's moving parts. And when it's done well, as you say, for example, with the Tras los Muros from Señorans or the Vegadares Branco or the Davila M100 we tried, you know, in the last episode, it can be an excellent alternative expression of Rías Baixas Albariño.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I asked Vicky Marecki how to make good oaked Albariño, she said, carefully. And she admitted it was vital to first choose the right kind of Albariño to put in the oak, which is important. But then it was essential to work with the lees, which is what stitches the freshness and the oak together. So that was really interesting to hear.
Yeah, and ultimately, it's just adding to the diversity of what is an already broad category of fine Rías Baixas whites, which is positive. Now, just before we finish, can I recommend one wine we didn't manage to get into the last episode and which I have loved for years? Okay. So it is the Albariño de Fefinianes 2022. A lovely, zesty wine with notes of fresh peach and white pepper. It is textbook Salnés Albariño, and it always has been, frankly. This vintage has got lovely succulence and roundness. It is lovely stuff, and great with spicy chicken and couscous, as it happens.
As we can attest. There we go. By way of closing summary, Rías Baixas does a very fine line in serious, fresh, complex white wines that come in all kinds of styles, from youthful vigour to lees-aged texture to oak complexity and bottle-aged magnificence. The 5 subzones give different expressions, while blending and innovation also play a part too. Albariño is the star here, a great variety that gives structured, intense, complex, distinctive whites. The future looks set to bring more diversity and quality over time. Remember, this is a relatively young appellation with lots more to discover and give, from sparkling to reds and beyond. We will certainly be watching and tasting with interest.
It's also a beautiful and delicious place to visit, so we may just need to monitor progress close up.
I think so.
Anyway, our thanks to Isabel Salgado, Vicky Marecki, Luisa Freire, Stephanie Schilling, Lucia Barbosa and Natalia Rodriguez. Also to Dio Rías Baixas for sponsoring this 2-part series. Most of all, thanks to you for listening. Please do give us a glowing rating and review if you liked this episode. Until next time, cheers.